Welcome everybody to the Environment Scrutiny Committee. Due to the current COVID-19 restrictions, today's meeting is held using audio-visual conferencing and is available for the public and members to listen to via an audio feed on the agenda page of our website or via the Council's YouTube channel. So thanks everybody for coming. I know it's under quite strange circumstances. In particular, thank you to Fliss and Harjit for joining us tonight as well to go through the climate change agenda which we've been discussing. So have we had, do we need to do roll call?
Councillor Reynolds, we've got Councillor Mark Boylan, Councillor Gemma Offland, Councillor Thomas Yanker, yourself, and then we've got Councillor Carolyn Healy in attendance as Cabinet Member.
Super, thank you. Have we received any apologies for absence?
We have not.
Thank you, Kieran. Any declarations of interest? I suspect not. Super, thank you everybody. Also, the minutes from our last meeting, which have been circulated prior to tonight's meeting. Is there any comments? In that case, have we got a proposer and seconder for the minutes? Thanks, Gemma's proposing and Mark is seconding them. I assume we are all in favour of them. Super. So, without any further ado, we'll pass over to Fliss, Harjit and Carolyn, who have very kindly agreed to meet us tonight to talk about climate change and go through the presentation. I think
yeah.
I'll pass over.
All right, I'll try and load up the presentation.
Oh, just whilst we do that, as a reminder, if we remember to mute ourselves and then use the hands up function if we wish to speak, and then it will stop us from talking over one another as well.
Okay, so first of all, can everybody see that now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So good evening, everybody. For those that don't know me, I'm Fliss Mercer, and I'm the Director of Communities, Customer and Commercial Services. And climate change has only quite recently come across into my service area back in May. So I've also asked Harj to come along tonight, and we're going to do a bit of a double act. Harj, do you just want to introduce yourself, explain your role?
Yes, my name's Harj Riot, and I'm the climate change and sustainability coordinator, and also have Claire Webb, who's not with us today, but she project supports as well, to further climate change within the council and the borough as a whole.
Okay, thank you, Harj. And I think it's only right for me to say that Harj has done a lot of the work so far on our climate change plan that we're going to be talking about tonight. So just wanted to make sure she got the credit for that. So thank you, Harj. This presentation was circulated earlier on in the year. I think it was about April time, Gilly, but we thought it would be useful just to run through it because it is a good introduction, hopefully, to the climate change work that the council's doing. But I know that you do want to look in a bit more detail at some topics as well as we move forward. So what we're going to cover tonight is Harj is going to do a bit of an introduction to the science behind climate change and what impacts climate change is currently having. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the council has committed to do around climate change, and then I suppose take you through our journey so far. So just highlight some of the things we've already done, and then look at some of the things we're looking to do over the next year or so in our action plan. And we also do want to talk about work we're doing with the wider community as well. And I know that the topic that you asked to focus on tonight is community engagement. So we would come back to that after we've done the presentation for a bit of a discussion on that topic. I'll hand over to Harj, who's going to talk us through the science bit.
Just going through very quickly then, I thought this was a really useful infographic which explains what climate change is. So as we're all aware, human activities have increased greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which have basically increased the amount of energy that's being trapped by the Earth's atmosphere. So in summary, what's happening is solar energy that's radiating back from the Earth's surface is being absorbed by greenhouse gases, which I should say are actually natural. But what's happening is because of land use changes and because of human activity, those greenhouse gases are increased. So what's happening is that that's increasing the greenhouse gas effect. So which is obviously causing temperatures to rise, and from that we're getting extreme weather events. Next slide, if that's okay. Thank you. And I thought this was a really good picture just to show the type of effects and changes that we are experiencing due to obviously enhanced greenhouse effect that's being caused. Obviously missing on this, and which is quite prevalent to our area, is flooding, but it shows all the other issues quite well, which are being felt and will be felt worldwide. The next slide, please. So what I've done here is I've summarised what's come out from the Climate Change Act. So one of the provisions of the Climate Change Act of 2008 was to have on a 5-year cycle was for the government to do a risk assessment of what climate change would mean for the UK. So the first one was in 2012 and the most recent one was in 2017. And so based on that, this is what they're saying are the effects. And obviously these can also be applied to Telford and Wrekin. I will quickly go through them now. So what they're saying is we're seeing a trend towards warmer, wetter winters, hotter, drier summers, and obviously there looks like there's changes to our rainfall patterns as well, which is leading to flooding, which we've seen recently in the borough. There's risks to health and well-being and productivity, risks of shortages to public water supply, for whether that would be for agriculture, energy generation, industry, risks to natural capital. Now, what they mean by that is our biodiversity, risks to domestic food production and trade. So what we used to grow in the past may not be what we can grow in the future due to changes in climate. And then obviously due to warmer, wetter winters, there's new risks to pests and diseases, which we never been used to before in this country. And obviously that would affect our species, affect us, and obviously the plants and animals that are resident in England. And then Fliss, as I said, it's a double act. So Fliss, feel free to take over the next slide.
Okay, thank you, Hard. So I think before moving on, I do know that all the members of the committee are very passionate about climate change. So I know we're probably telling you stuff that you're already aware of, but obviously as it's a public meeting, we thought it was useful just to give that introduction in terms of what climate change is and the impacts it's having. So in terms of the national policy position, did you want to come in there, Julie? Sorry.
Apologies, I just realised I haven't asked whether you would rather take questions as you go through the presentation or at the end, just for clarification.
Quite happy to take them as we go through. Okay. It's often easier to do that because I always forget at the end what I wanted to ask partway through. So if people feel happier to do that, I think that's absolutely fine.
Okay.
So
for interrupting.
No, that's okay. That's absolutely fine. Thank you. So the national position is that the government has said that they want to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. But the council decided that actually they wanted to set a target to be carbon neutral much earlier than that, by 2030. And when we're talking about carbon neutral, we don't mean that there won't be any emissions at all from council operations and activities, but that we would be seeking to reduce our emissions and to also take action to remove emissions and offset our emissions, and to achieve a position where we were carbon neutral. So as you'll be aware, there was an emergency climate change declaration made almost a year ago, so it's quite good timing for the meeting tonight. where we made that commitment that we wanted to be carbon neutral by 2030. But obviously the council's emissions are only a small part of the emissions in the whole borough. So at the same time, we said that our aspiration, our aim was for the borough to also be carbon neutral by the same date. Obviously, it's not something the council can directly control, but we do have a community leadership role. We do want to work in partnership with local organisations and with our residents to try and deliver that. So since then, there's been quite a lot of work going on and really focusing on 3 areas. The first is there's been a lot of modelling work done, which Harj is going to talk to us about in a bit, to establish exactly our position in terms of our carbon footprint and where we need to get to. We've also been working right across the council to identify the different actions that we could take to reduce our impact moving forward. And some of those we've started to deliver already. And the third area of work we've been focusing on is that partnership work. So we have now had our first meeting of the borough partnership, which I'll talk about a bit more in a moment. We had been hoping to have that earlier on in the year. However, with COVID, it did delay slightly, and in the end we were hoping to have the face-to-face meeting, as I'm sure you would prefer to have your scrutiny meeting face-to-face, but we've opted again for the Teams meeting, and it did actually work really well. So we have been able to move forward with that. So the motion was made in July, and it was very much about putting our own house in order as the council. The focus in the plan is very much on us reducing our emissions as far as we possibly can. That's the main thing that we want to do. And then if we're not able to reduce our emissions down to as low a level as we possibly could, we would then be looking to look at things like habitat creation and tree planting in order to offset our emissions. We want to look at this in a broad context though. So obviously we want this to be a piece of work that actually benefits our communities. And what we are very conscious of is that we also need to make sure that we are still providing employment opportunities for people locally. We're still attracting inward investment. So we need to strike that right balance in order to make sure that the work that we do around climate change does have that positive benefit for our communities and doesn't further heighten any inequality. So the motion was worded very specifically around that point. In terms of the partnership model, we'll talk about that in a moment, but the third element of what we want to focus on is around actually adapting to climate change as well as actually tackling it, because we are at a point with climate change where even if we take as many steps as we possibly can, as quickly as we can now, there will still be an impact. And Harj has mentioned some of the ways that it's already impacting on us, and we all saw the effects of that in Ironbridge earlier on this year. So one thing that we do want to do as the council and in partnership with others is to make sure that we've got good measures in place to help our local communities be resilient and to deal with the effects of climate change, such as flooding. Okay, I think one of the key messages that we'd like to try and get across tonight is that climate change action is not completely new to the council, and this is something we have been working on for a number of years, and we've obviously accelerated what we've been doing over the last year as well. And I just want to pull out a few examples of some of the things that we've done. I'm going to start with the work we've done around our green guarantee sites. We're very fortunate in Telford to live in such a green borough. About 89% of our population actually live within 300 metres of a green space, and that's been really helped by the fact that over the last few years we have protected these green guarantee sites. Obviously very, very important from a climate change point of view, because they do help to remove carbon dioxide emissions from the air and store them, and they also are very important from a biodiversity point of view. So biodiversity, we know that that can be badly affected by climate change. Harj has touched on that. And actually, with our green guarantee sites, that means that we can actually protect the biodiversity that we have and give it a chance to actually recover from any of the impacts of climate change. So those green networks are really, really important. We've also done a number of energy projects. So one of the ones that you may be aware of is that we are really now in the very final stages of our programme to replace all our street lighting with LED lighting. The slide there refers to the financial savings, which is obviously a byproduct, if you like, of that work. But from a carbon point of view, last year we saved more than 3,500 tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions from that work. So quite a significant project. You'll also probably be aware that we are one of the first councils in the UK to own and operate our own solar farm. So we're quite an early adopter of that technology. We often talk about how many gigawatt hours of green electricity is being produced, but that's not often very meaningful to people. So it's helpful that Harge has put here how many homes that equates to. So just to give you a flavour, it is about 800 average UK sized homes. There's enough power per year to power all those homes that's being generated by the solar farm. We've also this year really made good progress at starting to look at our building estate and retrofitting some of our buildings with LED and solar panels. So we've looked at 4 buildings this year, and we've got some more that we're looking at in the year coming up. So that's, again, you can see there the benefits that's been from a both financial point of view and a carbon dioxide reduction point of view as well. Gilly, did you have a question?
I've got 2.
Okay.
So the one is about the solar farm. I know obviously it's been running really successfully for a couple of years now, but I know initially when it was talked about, the issue was that the energy couldn't be kept locally, so it had to go to the national grid. I understand that's still the case. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is there any remit that we could kind of lobby the national grid or lobby the government so that actually we could keep that benefit local? So obviously we're striving to achieve this 20 years ahead of the national government, and actually that may play a part in that. So I'm just wondering if there's any kind of whether that's got legs or not. And then in terms of the Sustainable Buildings Initiative, is the intention that other kind of large public buildings such as Open Gates Theatre, for example, will follow suit with that?
Yeah, okay, I'll cover both of those in order. So the solar farm, you're quite right, the power is currently exported to the grid. It was always our intention, and the site's located in an area where there is industrial development around it, and we knew that further development was coming around that site. So it's in the Horton Wood area, as you probably know. Our intention was to install what's called a private wire, which is basically a direct connection from the solar farm directly to a large industrial user. So to do exactly what you said, so that electricity could be used by a local business and it would benefit them from having slightly cheaper electricity, and also that stability of knowing that what they were going to be paying for their electricity over the next few years. However, when we came to do that, and we did quite a bit of work with a large user who was interested in working with us on it, we contacted Ofgem, who we have our accreditation for our feed-in tariff, which is part of the income that comes in for the solar farm. And Ofgem said that it would change the installation, the solar farm, to mean that we would lose our feed-in tariff, which is over half the income that the solar farm brings in. So although nothing was changing other than who we were providing the power to, that is currently the position. And we've spoken to a number of other councils who've had similar advice from Ofgem. So we lobby on that subject. So if that rule was changed to enable us to still receive our feed-in tariff payment, and we could install a private wire, that would be our preference. But it was financially not viable to progress with that advice from Ofgem. So we are hoping that does change, because we are aware that there are other councils who've got renewable energy projects that would like to either supply one of their own buildings or an industrial user in their areas as well. So that's a bit disappointing, really, but that is the current position from Ofgem on that. So the second question, yes, we are looking to do another 7 buildings, and the place is actually one of the buildings that we are looking at for this year. And the plan is to work through our whole building estate in a systematic way over the next few years. There is grant funding available currently to do some of these schemes, so we're taking full advantage of that as well. So that's beneficial to the council, and obviously means that we can progress more buildings. So we do want to do that, and I think we would also like to look at school estate as well, working in partnership with schools. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Just in terms of what you're saying about the solar farm, is there, because obviously you said a number of other authorities are affected similarly, whether the LGA could be used as a vehicle to kind of collectivise our voices, so we're all speaking as one, and maybe that would be, it may already be the case, but
it's a good idea. Yeah. Most of the discussions have taken place through an organisation called the Association of Public Service Excellence, which has a sort of energy branch, and we're part of that network, and most of that lobbying has been done through that organisation. But the LGA is another route we could definitely take. Yes. Thomas, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Just extending on the Sustainable Building Initiative, is this something we would look to extend into the private sector in regards of incentivising businesses, for example, to come into Telford and Wrekin Borough, and if they could, use PV solar on their units, because there's a lot of big units that have gone up very recently, particularly on Stafford Park. I know the company I work for has definitely had solar panels put on their roof, but I don't believe there was any sort of incentivisation for that. I was wondering if that's something we were actively looking into, or is there already a scheme in place that is doing that?
There is some grant funding available that's different to the stream that we're using as the council, that I'm looking at Harge now, because I believe that's for small and medium enterprises rather than really big ones. So small and medium companies would be eligible for that funding. So one of the things that's on our work programme is to do a big drive to promote that to businesses so that they know that's available, and that's is it for up to 50% of the funding, that grant?
That's correct. And it's called MARI, and it's coming, and it's being disseminated through the lab.
Yeah, and that's available until 2021. So obviously it's one of those grant schemes that we do need to promote, because obviously once it's gone, it's gone. So we want to make sure that people know about that. That's also available to town and parish councils. So we have been doing some work through the partnership to promote that to the town and parish councils, because obviously, again, that's a really useful funding stream to help incentivise these schemes to come forward.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. I was just going to mention a few other things that we've done over the last year, in addition to the ones that are on the slide there. So one thing that we have done this year is we've switched to 100% green energy tariff for all our council buildings and streetlights. And we also rolled that out to our schools in April as well this year. Back in September, we also launched the food waste recycling scheme very successfully, and that saved 918 tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions as well, and has led to us being 5% above the EU recycling target. So that's really made quite a difference from a recycling point of view. And then I think the final example I was going to highlight of things that have changed over the last year is really a COVID related one. And I think COVID-19 has been a bit of a dual-edged sword for us in terms of the work we're doing on climate change. On the one hand, it's slowed us down a little bit because Harge and Claire, who was mentioned earlier, were initially redeployed onto frontline duties for a period of time. However, there have been really quite significant climate change benefits in terms of the council's activities, in the sense that through the technology that we've now rolled out, Teams and headsets, as I'm wearing now, etc., it's enabled about 1,400 employees a day on average to work from home. And what we've seen as a result of that is obviously our buildings haven't been open. We've had a massive reduction in printing. Our business mileage has reduced. So although we have had people out and about doing work in the community, we haven't had as many people travelling to different meetings because they've been doing them on Teams. So it's about halved the business mileage that we've seen sort of from April 2020 to the comparable period last year. So although we are now starting to return to come into the offices in bubbles in a low-key way, in a safe way, we are hoping that some of those changes of patterns of behaviour we will be able to sustain, because actually that's incredibly positive, and we now got the technology to do more work virtually. Thomas, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Just a really quick one. When we're calculating our business mileage and the effects to CO2 emissions, are we also counting the mileage of our partners, so Ide Verdi, etc., or is it just council fleet?
I'm going to ask Harj to answer that one.
At the moment, it's in the plan we've just looked at scope 1 and scope 2, so it's council. We'll be looking to once we have data to increase scope 3, which would be who our partners who we work with.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I'll move on. I'm going to pass over now to Harj, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the modelling work that I mentioned earlier.
Okay, so as Fliss has already mentioned, the council has already proactively been working on climate change agenda for quite some time now, and we were able to plot the actions that we've already taken and what has that meant in regards to CO2 savings, and we can say that we've already reduced our carbon footprint by 44%. Fliss, are you okay to go on to the next slide? Thank you. And so that means because what we've done is we've measured, as I said, we've looked at our emissions using a tool called the greenhouse gas protocol. So that's used by most organisations, so it's comparable. So it's like for like. And as I said, we've concentrated on scope 1 and 2. So in regards to that, we've been able to work out our footprint at around 8,000 tonnes, which is that blue bar there on that graph that you can see. And those orange bars are the actions that we've identified in the action plan, which we believe will make an indent into our footprint to reduce it down significantly. Now, by putting some measurable CO2 reductions against those actions, we can say that we believe those actions, if enacted and when enacted, will reduce our CO2 tonnage by about 4,000 tonnes. So that means we've got about another 4,000 tonnes that we need to find of actions. So so that gives us an idea, so we know how far we got to, where how much further work we need to do. So as it says in the action plan, it's a live action plan, it's not set in stone. So what will happen is we'll continue to add actions. And now it's also worth bearing in mind that the action plan, all of the actions don't have a CO2 figure next to them, because we need a bit more information to enable us to work what that saving could possibly be. So as we work through the actions, as we get better data, we'll be able to put some information and CO2 savings against them, which will hopefully reduce our footprint some more. Sorry, Caroline?
You've actually covered what I was going to say, Harj.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to reiterate that obviously the action plan, as we've said, it's the first step, and we know that there's more to do. And as Harj said, there are actions in that plan that haven't got the CO2 emissions figure against them. Obviously, we need to do more work to understand what that can be, or we just do it and then we measure it, because sometimes it's hard to predict what the CO2 savings will be. So we know that there are further actions that we're already on train to do that will bring that down further. And of course, through working with others, that's when we're sort of looking for those suggestions and ideas for other things then that can come through into the plan. And it will be a live plan that we will regularly update and change as new actions come forward and as we progress the actions that are in there. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Jilly, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's just I was looking at the figures. Obviously, we know that we've already got a deficit, which we need to find those ways of bridging that gap. But obviously, year on year, that the figure isn't going to stand still. because otherwise that would assume that we wouldn't be doing any other projects or schemes or anything within the borough. So how are we going to future-proof that? So is it going to be a case that any project or scheme would need to demonstrate that it can be carbon neutral before we would pursue it? Or is it a case that we will just, it'll be a continual looking for different ways of doing it? Or are we future-proofing it by ensuring projects are carbon neutral?
I think that's an excellent question. I mean, I think it's probably a combination of both those things, in a sense that one of the things that is in the action plan relates to building into cabinet reports a section which looks at the environmental impact of projects that we're doing and new policies that we're introducing for exactly the reasons you're talking about. Actually, the best way to try and address some of these things is to build it in from the outset. So obviously that's the key sort of policy mechanism in terms of things coming through and being decided that are new. So if they're significant scale projects, they would be coming through that route generally. So that is a way that we will be able to try and get it right from the outset. But inevitably we will need to continue to look for new ideas and to actually add to what's in the action plan, and as Harj has mentioned, make sure that the things that are in the action plan where as yet we haven't quantified the benefits and the impact, that we do that work and we can add that in as well. So it's all of those things. I think the other thing I would mention is that we have, as part of our procurement now, built into our procurement processes a weighting around environmental factors, so that new tenders that we're doing, we look at the climate change impacts, use of single-use plastics, which I know we spoke about at the last meeting, and there's a weighting built into that as part of that process. So that's another way that we can obviously look at the impact from our operations as well in terms of what we're actually procuring and commissioning.
What is the weighting given to it? Because obviously I know social value and all the other aspects. Is environment up there as one of the most important in terms of the procurement process, or actually is it still, could it be counterbalanced by something else which is deemed more important?
It's 10%, I think, at the moment, isn't it, Harj?
Yes.
It's 10%, yeah. And then obviously there are sometimes other weightings applied. So we tend to often have a sort of cost and quality split on the remaining factors. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Carolyn, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just want to add in terms of the future proofing kind of, new projects and new things that the council might do. I think, as we said at the start and as we made clear when we made the climate emergency declaration, this is about doing this in a way that doesn't disadvantage particularly our most vulnerable communities. So, for example, I don't know, if we were to do a project around homelessness that actually was not a carbon neutral project, it actually did, there's a carbon impact to it, that wouldn't stop us doing that project, because clearly addressing homelessness is something that's really important. But what we can then do is then look to that offsetting. So look at where we're identifying areas across the borough where we can make habitat change, whether that be planting trees and creating woodlands, or whether that be improving meadows or wetlands. Wetlands are particularly good for holding and locking in carbon, as a way of balancing off some of those things. So I think there's, whilst, we want to try and in everything we do be as close to not causing any emissions as possible. I just think we've also got to balance that against the needs of the other things that we as a local authority have to try and deliver in terms of supporting our communities and looking after our most vulnerable people. And that's the way that we would manage that in this process. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why we sort of talk about carbon neutral and recognising that doesn't mean that any of the things we do will mean we're never generating any emissions, because that's, given the range of things that we do, that's impossible really. Okay, I will move on. So just looking at some of the things that we're looking to do that are in the action plan over the next year or so. So we've talked about the additional buildings that we're looking to do the retrofitting schemes on. Another thing that we do want to do, sort of picking up the points I made earlier about COVID and the benefits from a transport point of view, is we want to look at all our sort of travel plan for our employees, but in particular we're quite keen to encourage other ways for people to get to work and actually travel around when they're at work safely. And one of the things we are planning to do in September is to implement a new cycle to work scheme with a salary sacrifice element to it for employees. We also are interested in electric vehicles. So there's a couple of things that are coming up around that. We have obviously a fleet of vehicles in the council, and our plan is, as those get to end of life, we will look to replace those with low emission vehicles. And we will be making an announcement later this week about some plans we've got around our fleet and electric vehicles. So I'm not going to steal the thunder on that one, but hopefully on Friday there'll be an announcement around that. And we are looking to in September to actually launch a procurement for electric vehicle charging points in our car parks, because obviously electric vehicle usage is increasing, and we want to make sure that there's sufficient charging points across the borough. Thomas?
Yeah, I think you just stole my thunder there, actually. I was about to ask in the latest announcements that are due any time now about the amount of vehicle charging points for electric vehicles there's going to be, because I know at the moment there's an inadequate amount, quite honestly. And I don't know if it meant having to reopen things like the local plan and having to get the policy written into there. I don't know if Carolyn's better placed to answer that, but yeah, how many extra vehicle charge points are we looking at procuring, if I may ask?
Harj, do you know the specific number?
I don't know the specific number, but I can say in the second part with regards to the local plan review, yeah, there will be a climate change policy in there that also does reference electrical vehicle charging points for residential and non-residential properties, and there'll be a number put against those. So if that answers that question in regards to local plan review, which is to start this autumn, but I don't know the specifics of, but I can get back and answer that question and find out for you.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind.
We'll check.
No,
we'll
that's
check
fine.
that and we'll feed back. Yeah.
No, that'd be great.
I mean, it's
Sorry.
quite. Sorry.
That's
It's
right.
quite
I was
a
just going to
significant piece of work they're doing, I think.
Were we looking to fit them? Is it just around council buildings, in council-owned car parks, or are we spreading out wider across the parishes? Or are we keeping it more central? Because
I think
the large
it's
borough,
both.
a lot of the vehicle charging points that are going to be required if we're looking to set the standard for the next 15, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, it's both. Yeah,
It's both. It's
Yeah.
both private
Not
and yeah.
yes.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, so it's quite significant from that point of view, but we will check that specific question for you.
Thank
I
you.
know one of the areas that members were interested in was transport, so I think at the next meeting we are going to invite the transport lead to come, and he will be able to talk to you in more detail around that, which I think would be useful. Okay.
Carolyn,
Oh,
do you want to come in next?
Yeah, I think I can just start obviously as well. We're looking at actual fast charging. So we wouldn't necessarily deliver a private sector partner to provide fast charging point. So as effectively a service station. But also, of course, coming back to the planning issue, it's making sure there's sufficient electricity supply for any new developments. There's enough electricity loading to be able for people to then have their own electricity charging points. I think at the moment, because most car, I'm actually getting delivery of an electric car tomorrow, and a lot of makes of cars just use pod point as the kind of way of we have had that installed on Monday, and that's fine. Obviously things like Tesla and there's some that are a bit more sort of specific. So it's about having that sufficient electricity supply, particularly built into new developments, rather than as part of new build asking for the actual points to be built in, because there's a bit of a difference depending on what people purchase, and there's probably still some development in that area as electric cars continue to develop and be manufactured and refined. And so we have had discussions with Western Power Distribution about that, just to make sure that we're working alongside them, that that they can improve power, the power connection to all of our housing areas, and that there's sufficient supply, given that we expect this to be a growth area.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a question? Tim, are you on mute?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's showing as mute.
Good evening. Yeah, it is. IT connection is going to need to be thought through because the council phone is locked out and the council PC wouldn't boot 3 times and wouldn't shut down 3 times. So I've emailed you, Gilly, to tell you that, you know, this is like not working, but not to worry. Yeah, it was backing up. Thomas, when the transport lead comes to talk to us next time, will you be telling us the council's strategic approach to electric transport? So not just piecemeal, there's going to be this electric forecourt or there's going to be that housing estate which is going to have more electricity supply. But what's the overall strategy across the whole borough? And don't try and tell us now, but part of that will then be you will know how many charging points because you'll be telling us your strategy because you know the demand, you know how much demand there's going to be, therefore you know how many you need to supply. So, I mean, don't answer the question now, but I want to see that strategic approach across the whole borough, across the whole of electric transport, not just cars, not just domestic, but the whole piece.
I'll certainly feed that back to him. Thank you.
Well, that'll be the question that'll be coming if it's not answered, yeah?
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll move on. So obviously I've already talked about the replacement of street lighting with the LED lights. And we obviously want to complete that programme. There's obviously quite a few other lights that we have, for example, on car parks, etc. So that would be the next phase of work that we will be looking to undertake to look at all our other lighting assets as well. Linking back to the work we've already done on food waste collections in the borough, we want to actually make that available in all our council buildings as well. So in fact, employees, many of whom are residents as well, actually asked for this. So just before lockdown, we had actually rolled that out to our main office buildings. But as you know, we own many other buildings as well, and we want to have that available in all our buildings. So that's a piece of work we would like to do. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Bliss, for that on the food waste. And yeah, I think that's actually been an excellent, and credit to the council, excellent initiative. You know, well rolled out, good coverage, intelligent collection, and certainly where I live, it is well used. So I hope that's true across the borough. But you touched on LED highway and footway street lighting, and I guess your answer in terms of remaining lights being car parks related to Telford and Wrekin council assets, which is good.
Yes.
There are, well, I know of one parish council that's got 656 footway lights that it has under its control, and that's Newport Town Council. They're all converted to LED, I reassure you. But do you know of the other 25 parishes in Telford and Wrekin whether any of them have footway lights? For instance, Church Aston do, and do you know the status of their program to replace with LED if they have one?
Well, I was going to come on to how we're working with town and parish councils shortly, but it seems a good moment to talk about that. So we know that lots of town and parish councils are doing a lot of work in this area. Newport is one that's doing a lot of really good work. And some of the other town and parish councils who haven't yet done so are wanting to declare their own climate emergencies. So one of the things that the team is doing is working with the town and parish councils to assist in terms of a toolkit of how they can implement some of these actions in their local area. So that is a piece of work that we are looking to do, and we've got a small subgroup now of town and parish councils that we're working with to roll that work out. Harge, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, Fliss, exactly what you've just said there. We've established a subgroup of town and parish councils who are interested in declaring a climate emergency. They all may be at different stages, but we want to bring them collectively together because they can all learn from one another. And so issues like what you've just brought up there, LED street lighting, how they did it, how they funded it, the feedback, the payback. So the idea is to bring people together so they can learn from in each other, and we've done that and provide an avenue for them to engage with one another.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So to that end, given that change to LED lighting is a bit of a low fruit, because if you take Newport, for instance, it was not done for environmental reasons. It was done because it returns about 7 or 8% a year, and your loan to do it only costs you 2 or 3%. So it just like was good business. And they last longer and give a safer light, which is better for pedestrian safety. So, what's not to like? So what I was curious about was whether, specific to LED lights, you had a bit of a map of the whole borough, including parishes, and that if you lit it up, would it show which were LED and which were non-LED, so you knew who to target? Beyond a generic, but that's very good, the work on the climate change and climate change emergencies. But specific to LED, perhaps a technical approach to just ask each parish to report how many lights have you got and how many are LED and how many aren't, and then we'd sort of know the big picture. And that may not be something that you think is appropriate, but I think given it's such an easy win, it's a really easy thing to do. You just give Eon some money and they'll do it for you.
I think that's a good suggestion, and I think it's definitely something that we should put on the agenda for that group, because it is, I think those sort of projects that you're talking about, and the council also has prioritised some of those what I would describe as win-win projects. So they obviously have a huge climate change benefit, but also if there's a financial return as well, then that's doubly good, isn't it? So I know those are the sort of projects that town and parish councils are interested in. Right. So we can definitely put that on the agenda for the next subgroup meeting. Great. So thank you for suggesting that.
Thank you.
Gilly?
Thanks, Fliss. Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Tim said about the work we're doing with town and parish councils. Really, really important. And I think a lot of town and parish councils are very interested in this area, but don't necessarily know where to begin. And the fact that Telford and Wrekin Council are already on this journey means that they are very much placed to provide that framework. So I think, and that's something I'd been thinking about this afternoon, I think that's a really important piece of work, because obviously town and parish councils have their own budget and have lots and lots of public buildings and so on. That actually, I think that's an untapped resource for, driving this very noble cause forward. And I was thinking perhaps it could be a case that actually, if Telford and Wrekin Council design that framework, obviously in consultation with ourselves as a scrutiny committee, but with town and parish councils who, like Newport, who are already well on the way into that journey, it could be a case that individual town and parish councils can be accredited for being a green town and parish council, or however you want to phrase it. But the principle being that actually the borough council enables the smaller town and parish councils to do exactly that, and that having that intent to ensure that they are carbon neutral, I think is really important, because I'm on a town council, and I know that it's something we've discussed for a number of months, but don't necessarily know where to begin with it. So I think we could do a really, really important piece of work in making it much more visible as well. For example, you said earlier about that the Sustainable Building Initiative. I wasn't aware that was available for town and parish councils, and I know I'll go away to my town council and say, this is something we definitely should be getting on board with. So I suspect there are many others who, the intent is there, but actually haven't got the toolkit yet. So I think that's a really important piece of work.
Yeah, and I think, we've strengthened the capacity in the team. So Claire, who Harj mentioned, part of her role really is to do that work, engaging with town and parish councils and schools and other organisations, because we do recognise that. In terms of that specific pot of funding, I mentioned the borough partnership, and we do have town and parish council representation on the partnership as well. So I know that Katrina, who's on the partnership, was intending to put it on the agenda for the next parish forum meeting to try and spread the word for exactly the reasons you've said, because obviously there are many local councils that are thinking of going down that route, and to have 50% of the funding available, and it's time limited. I think they were actually going to invite the
Yes.
representative who deals with Mari to actually come and speak
Yes,
as well,
that's
so
correct.
to answer questions and provide a bit more detail as well. So
Yes.
I think that will be really helpful, but obviously we do want to promote it as widely as possible. So
yeah, I know that's really good that that's happening. But with parish forum, I know that not all parish and town councils necessarily attend, and I know that obviously that's not an easy thing for you to resolve. But just thinking, just in terms of the scrutiny committee, that might be something as individuals which we can, actually really support, because I suspect most of us are members of other town and parish councils, and between us we could probably cover the borough quite easily and speak very passionately about it as well.
Yeah.
And I know I can see Tim nodding. I'm sure Tim would love to take up that mantle. But actually, that could be something as a scrutiny committee, which we could really help with.
Yeah,
that would be brilliant.
Just to also just to put a bit more information, all schools, town and parish groups have been written to, or you will be receiving information about that Mari funding through email. And just exactly as you said, Gilly, the subgroup, which is led by Katrina Baker, is looking to have representation across the borough, because obviously there's many town parish councils and there's only so many officers to go around. So any help that could be lent to spread information and disseminate information of good work that's happening in other town and parish councils would be welcome. Obviously we can always feed that back to the subgroup and see how they'd like to progress that.
Yeah, but that offer's really appreciated, because I think it's good to get stuff out by email, but I think that word of mouth, that promotion with your contacts is just invaluable, because certainly I know me and Harge get lots of different emails about funding and opportunities all the time, and sometimes they can get a bit lost. So I think that offer is really appreciated. Thank you.
No problem.
Carolyn, did you want to come in there?
Harge said, but I was going to say that we actually were emailing all town and parish councils about the Mari funding anyway, not just relying on the parish forum, but Harge has covered that.
Okay, so hopefully through one of those channels, then the word will get out. So just moving on to kind of our workforce really now. So we've got a large workforce. One of the things we really want to do is raise awareness amongst our workforce of this issue. Partly, as I mentioned earlier, they are residents, so that all contributes to the borough position as well. But actually, there's quite a lot of research to suggest that actually, if you do a training program with your employees and you do initiatives to try and reduce energy usage in the workplace, it can have quite a tangible benefit. So it can be up to a 15% reduction in energy usage, which is not insignificant. We want to specifically, for our sort of senior leadership and lead member, so Carolyn, to undertake the carbon literacy training, because that is going to again raise awareness at that kind of decision making level, which is so critical really. So that's something that is definitely on our agenda for the next few months. I mentioned earlier that our focus is on trying to reduce our emissions wherever we possibly can, but obviously the other aspect of it is the carbon capture side of things. So we mentioned about the benefits of heathland, grassland and wetlands, and Carolyn was particularly highlighting wetlands as an example, and obviously on our council owned land we already have some of those habitats. There's the opportunity for us to enhance those. So for example, with grassland, the difference between sort of mown grass and a diverse meadow is, you're going to get twice the carbon storage benefits from that. So even if we don't actually extend our land holdings, we can actually enhance what we've got quite simply, relatively simply. So that is something that we want to do, and we're going to start a piece of work looking at Granville, and then continue that work into 2021. So there's quite a bit of work around that. The other aspect which most people would associate with climate change is obviously forests. We obviously originally envisaged to be a forest community, and the local plan will, as it moves through, will again reference that. And what we're doing at the moment is a mapping exercise which should be completed next month, looking at all our land holdings and all our woodland land holdings, and actually looking at the opportunity to enhance what we've already got. Similar principle that actually there are different things you can do with your woodland that is more beneficial from a climate change point of view, but also the opportunity to plant additional trees and to create new woodland as well. So that's quite a significant piece of work that's going on right now. The final thing that I was just going to highlight that we're focusing on is working with our major contractors. We've talked a little bit about procurement already, but obviously 3 of our major contracts are Veolia, ID Verde and Balfour Beatty, so our sort of environmental contractors. And obviously, although they're a contractor, they're delivering that service on the council's behalf, and therefore we are working with them to actually produce carbon reduction plans covering their operations as well. Okay, just moving on to the borough partnership then. This was established in earlier in the year, but we've only just had the meeting in June, as I mentioned, and we've got quite a broad range of people on the partnership. So we've got local businesses on there, schools, universities, we've got community groups, environmental groups, town and parish councils. Harge, who else have we got on the partnership? Just remind me.
We've got Veolia, so obviously our contractor. We have got I'm trying to think who else is possibly
Feels like a generation game now.
Yeah, we just we've tried to be encompassing as possible, because obviously climate change emissions in the borough are just not in one area. They cover multitudes of areas, so we're trying to involve many partners as we possibly can that can help us collectively reduce the borough footprint. And then also what's happening is the partnership won't be the only area where people can get involved. There'll be thematic subgroups, and where more people will be invited into them to help work on, obviously it's quite a big problem for collectively in the borough to reduce CO2, because we realise those can't be the only people that will be involved.
Yeah, so the aim with the partnership is that they will develop an action plan for the borough. And the plan is to do that by creating 6 subgroups, as Harge just mentioned. And so we've got about 20 different organisations at the moment represented on the partnership. And obviously there are many more organisations in the borough that would perhaps want to get involved with that. So it's quite difficult to actually select who to invite. But obviously what we've tried to do is exactly what Harge said, get that good cross section who've got that ability to network within their own sectors and spread the word. And through the subgroups, what we've done is we've asked the partnership members to identify if there's any other organisations or individuals who they feel it would be useful to invite to join one of the subgroups. So by doing that, we should be able to extend the number of organisations that can get involved. The other thing we have said with the partnership is that we will review the membership after 12 months, because it's potentially then an opportunity for one of the organisations who's been involved to say, actually, I would quite like now for another organisation to come in and actually get involved. And by doing that, I think we will get that turnover in the partnership, and that will help to keep it fresh and ensure we continue to get those new ideas coming in, which is really, really valuable as well. So that's just a bit about the partnership. In terms of scrutiny, I know through conversations with Gilly that members were quite keen to actually delve into areas a little bit more detail, and obviously we started to do that tonight. And I've just listed on this slide here the different areas that are within the council's current climate change plan. And I think, Gilly, you'd asked members to indicate which areas they were most interested in starting off having a look at in more detail. And I believe the two areas that came back were transport, which is why we've invited Matt, who's the transport lead, to come to the next meeting, and also community engagement, which we can move on to and have a look at in a bit more detail in a moment. But I didn't know if Carolyn wanted to add anything in terms of this overview before we do that.
No, I think you've covered everything. I think, as I just keep stressing, it is about we've made a start, and it's about capturing other thoughts and suggestions from yourselves and from others, through whatever means necessary, whether by individuals put stuff on our website or through the partnership, so that we can keep looking at all the different ways that we can meet this this agenda, because it is a real challenge. Just one sort of slightly unrelated thing, but we had an email at the back end of last week from Derek Thomas MP, who is putting in a 10-minute rule bill to sort of seek support for sort of basically financial support for councils to meet carbon neutral by 2030. And part of that drive is to stop councils from necessarily just kind of buying international offsetting, which is something that I don't think necessarily local councils are in a position to necessarily do that actually, but it's something that large corporations sometimes do, and they're actually making the action that we take very local. So so obviously offsetting locally through habitat creation that then has other benefits, both biodiversity and our local communities, but very much that local focus. We've looked at the bill, and the request really is for us as a local council to contact our MPs to ask for them to support the bill, and we're doing that. So we're writing to both MPs to seek the support, because obviously this is a challenge, and we're in difficult financial times, and some of this comes with a cost. It's got to be done, but it comes with a cost, and so if financial support can be directed to support councils in this, then that's all to the good as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question to Carolyn? Well, or to Fliss, I'm not sure. I was just wondering, is there already an existing kind of network, perhaps through the LGA or through other mechanisms, but which brings together kind of local authority leads on tackling climate change? Does that already exist?
There's an LGA group on climate change. There's a network of district councils actually. I don't know why it's a district council one rather than unitary councils, but they seem to welcome anyone in. So I've dipped into some of their sessions. So yeah, there is. But I said the LGA does have a climate change group within that as well. About and I guess a lot part of that is about sharing that best practice. As much as being an opportunity for lobbying.
Yeah, definitely.
And as I mentioned earlier, we do quite a lot of work with the Association of Public Service Excellence, that energy group as well, and they've got quite a broad scope, but I would say 90% of what they've been looking at over the last year has been climate change related. I think maybe more, Harj. It does feel like that's been top of everybody's agenda, so that's a really useful network for us as well. Quite a diverse range of councils involved with that.
And also I meet up with my fellow officers from the LEP area, that's Herefordshire and Shropshire, on climate change, because obviously climate change does not stop at borders. It obviously doesn't stop at the LEP area as well, but it works quite well to work with our partner local authorities as well, and meet up to see what they're doing, what we're doing, if there's any opportunities for collaborative working. So yeah, we're aware, and we are actively engaging.
Yeah, and I think there are obviously, all councils really, to a greater or lesser extent, are wrestling with exactly the same challenge. So I know Tim had suggested looking at what Manchester are doing, and we've been doing that. And I think, if there are any suggestions, if you come across an organisation that you think is doing good work in this area, we are really happy to have those suggestions and go away and look at good practice, because we're all in it together. And if someone's doing something good that we can adapt and adopt in Telford, then we're very happy to do that, in the same way we've helped others in the past with some of the work that we've done as well.
Tim, do you have a question?
Yes. I wasn't able to attend the first half of the meeting. So I'm glad that the officers made mention of Manchester, because that was in the context of the carbon budget that they were using as a tool to manage their and track their progress against their objectives. And in the context of scrutiny, and perhaps I'm applying experience of one scrutiny to perhaps a new way of doing things, but certainly in health and adult care scrutiny, the debates where the cabinet lead attended the meeting were not led by the cabinet lead; they were led by the scrutiny committee, because scrutiny's job in that context was to be very objective in terms of the council's own performance, and not necessarily to be supportive of the council's actions or their progress against their objectives, because it might have been insufficient. And in that context, I noticed there's a fairly long and distinguished list of areas that scrutiny might look at, and I requested we look at governance. Now, I don't know whether you've covered that off, but we will be looking at governance anyway and as a matter of course. And governance is in the context of, is the council doing what it said it was going to do when it said it was going to do it? And that isn't any individual area. That isn't interest in community engagement or being advocates or talking to parish councils or looking at transport plans and how many charging points. That's the big picture. And I just want to know whether either we've decided we're not going to have a tracking, monitoring and scrutiny role of the big picture, or whether that's something that I just missed earlier.
Sorry, Tim, just to clarify, so obviously the email went round about which areas we wanted to look at, and a lot of support was pretty broadly distributed. So I spoke to Fliss about the topic for tonight. So the top two were transport and community engagement. And unfortunately, the transport officer couldn't attend till the next meeting, so we've put community engagement on tonight. But very much expressed to Fliss that there was interest in all the other areas, so it's not a case that because it wasn't on tonight it's been dropped. It's not that at all. So we will obviously be looking at governance. It's just not on tonight's agenda.
Thanks for that reassurance, Julie, because you'd appreciate that in a way, for me, that's the most important issue out of all these. Are we making the progress towards our carbon emissions reductions that we said we were going to make, and by when? And we appreciate it's a phased process, it's a step process, but is the council doing what it said it was going to do? Because that's our job on behalf of the residents, to ensure dispassionately and outside the likes of the cabinet or officers or whatever what's going on. And all I was thinking was, if I can't learn that information through scrutiny, then I would have to try and learn it another way. But I would like to use scrutiny committee because that's the council and the administration's own proposal in terms of partnership and cross-party working. You wanted to work through scrutiny, so I'm here trying to work through scrutiny. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, Tim, and that is the remit of the committee. So okay. I want to allay your fears. Carolyn, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just I mean, I absolutely welcome that, and that's absolutely fine. That's part of scrutiny's role. But also for me, I want us to be very transparent. That as we do our updates, we will also regularly report back to full council. We'll do an annual report in relation to it. So the action plan was adopted in February, so we're looking really at next February. We'll report back on progress to full council as well, and obviously publicly, so that we can be very clear, what actions we've taken, what difference that's made, and so that there's also that mechanism for some of that tracking as well, Tim. So, but both are welcome, and scrutiny, obviously, I guess, can go a bit deeper into some things than we have time for necessarily always at full council. So I think both are welcome.
That's great, thank you. I mean, the point about scrutiny along with full council is that they're both public meetings. The public can attend. They may not.
Yeah.
Nobody may be listening, not even us. But
No, yeah. and I think that I want that transparency to the public. That again, that we want to do with Fliss and Harge and I have been discussing the website and just getting more information on there. Obviously, we as Fliss said, Harge was redeployed for a period of time. Claire's quite new into the team. We're obviously trying to get things like the partnership set up, but then we do want to come to the website, get a lot more information on there, so that it's very clear to the public what we're doing, what impact that's having, as well as what they can then do as individuals in support of that.
Excellent, thank you.
I think just to continue from that, Tim, is that as a scrutiny committee, actually, we're very lucky in that the officers and Carolyn's been very clear that actually they want to learn from us as much as we can learn from them. So I think Carolyn's made it absolutely clear that the door is open, and we can input as much as we possibly can. So as much as we are there as well to track that progress, we're also there to contribute to that progress and drive it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Julie. Are we okay to move on to the community engagement part?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just going to start off with just setting out some of the things that we're either already starting to do or that we are planning to do. So obviously we've just had a discussion about scrutiny and the role of scrutiny, and that obviously members are a very key group that we want to engage with. And obviously there is members from different parties on the scrutiny committee, which is welcome. And it was really positive that when the motion actually came through full council this time last year, there was that real broad cross-party support for the direction that we were moving in, which was good. The other aspect is that I know Carolyn is keen to give an opportunity to all members to be able to engage in the discussion about climate change. So Carolyn, I don't know if you want to briefly talk about that part.
Yeah, so I'm looking to do some drop-in sessions, so fairly informal, just an opportunity. And I'll probably, forgive me, Fliss and Harge, kind of we'll need to do a few of them, I think, to make sure people have got the chance. But just for members to just come and have a discussion and talk through the action plan, just be briefed on the action plan, but also to ask questions, put forward suggestions, and that be open to anyone that's interested, because I am conscious that there are members who do have a particular passion for this area who are not on this committee, and so it's just giving everybody that opportunity just to have those discussions in a fairly informal way. And obviously for the moment we'll do it on Teams, and at some point we might do those kind of things face to face. So that's the idea behind those sessions, and we'll get the dates sorted fairly soon so people can start sort of putting them in diaries and booking in.
Yeah. Obviously we need to work with other organisations in the borough, so the partnership is the aspect that we've started work on. The 6 groups that I mentioned, one of those groups will have a focus around engagement and communication. So they will be specifically looking at how we and other organisations can spread the word across the borough. So that is a group that we as the council, I think, want to be on. So the partnership is not being led by the council. We are a participant in that. The subgroups will not all be led by the council, although we will sort of support and provide sort of secretarial support. But that is one of the groups that we do think we, as the council, have got a role to play in terms of community engagement. We've talked a little bit already about some of the work we're doing, starting to do with town and parish councils. Schools is another key group. Obviously, we've got a very direct relationship with the majority of our schools in the borough, in the sense that they are still maintained schools. So in fact, the buildings that they're in, we are the landlord. So it's a very direct relationship, but actually we do work very closely with our academies as well. And we obviously want to try and engage schools because that is the future around climate change, and we know it's a huge passion for many young people in our borough. So we want to work closely with schools as well, and as I mentioned, that's going to be a core part of Claire's role. I know at the last scrutiny committee, I think it was Julie, you suggested this idea of a sort of buddy approach for local organisations. So if there is a school that has actually done some really strong work around climate change, that they could spread the word to another school, they could then pass it on to the next school. So it's what tends to happen with these type of programs of work is that if you get a school that's leading the way, and I think we've seen that with Hollinswood Primary around some of the work they're doing around single-use plastics, is that they can get inundated with requests from other schools to help, and it becomes a bit overwhelming because they've still got their core job of teaching and learning, and they can perhaps help one other school, and actually if that school could then pass that learning on to another school. And I thought that was a really, really good suggestion, and I think that would also work well with town and parish councils in the same way that we wouldn't want everyone bombarding Newport, for example. We'd want to sort of spread the load, and hopefully that sort of system of everybody kind of cascading on the knowledge that they've got, and some of those groups that we talked about where that learning gets shared, and toolkits, etc., I think will be really helpful. We also obviously want to talk directly to residents and hear from residents, many of whom are also equally passionate about climate change. One of the ways that we want to do that is we have got a resident survey that will be launched next week. And that has a section in it around climate change, and we will be seeking people's views about climate change and their suggestions about what they would like to see happen. But also we want to understand what actions people in the community are currently doing themselves to tackle climate change. And the idea behind the survey is that we would look to repeat that on a regular basis, so that we can have a baseline now of where we are, and hopefully over time see people's engagement with this agenda increasing as we do this work. We've also recently launched a new volunteering opportunity, which we've called Climate Change Champions, and that is an opportunity that is open to everyone in the borough. It's open to younger people and also to families, and that's quite positive because some of our volunteering opportunities we have to limit the age on them, but with this one we did say we wanted it to be open to everybody. And the idea behind this role is twofold. We would like our champions to, if we have action days or events, we would like them to come along and join in, spread the word with their family, their friends, their communities, wherever they're based, to encourage them to take part, perhaps organise their own events. We're very much looking to have a programme of events through the year. There's many national and international campaigns that link into the sustainability work that the council's doing, and we want to have that regular programme, and we want to link our champions into that. The other aspect of the champion role that we're interested in is kind of using them very much as a sounding board in order to sort of test out ideas, things that we want to do. If we're doing some work around a particular theme, we could actually ask those champions to go and talk to their friends, their family. If they're in a school, perhaps other members of the school in terms of what their views are on a particular topic. So we do see them as a way of actually trying to reach out into the wider community and get different views being fed back to us. So that's a role that we're going to be promoting over the next few months. Carolyn's mentioned the website. We've obviously got a start off at 10 with that, but we very much want to make that a lot more interactive. It's an opportunity for people to be able to send in their suggestions to us proactively, and I think we quite like the idea of because it is such a broad range of topics within that climate change umbrella, we quite like the idea of having a topic of the month or a topic every other month or whatever, with a particular theme, and encouraging people to send us in their thoughts and ideas around that. Depending where we go with with COVID, we may look to have some sort of virtual discussions around a particular topic as well. Social media is another channel that we have used quite a lot already in terms of our communication, and it's very good for engaging people, and we get quite a lot of comments coming back through that, and we're able to capture those and feed that into our work, and I think we could make even more use of that. And then one of the other ideas that we've discussed is the idea of having an actual public event that people could come along to hear about some of the work the council's doing and our partners, but also actually an opportunity for people to comment on what we're doing and suggest different ideas that they feel that we should be prioritising. Obviously, we don't know when we'll be able to do that, but that is something that we would like to do. I know Councillor Boylan had mentioned that he'd attended an event, I think it was in Shropshire, and I think we are interested in your feedback on that idea and how you think that could work. If you've got any suggestions about that, we'd be really happy to hear those. So those are some of the ideas we've had so far, but we are very open to different ways of doing things. I think one of the things we spoke about at the last meeting is trying to make sure that we reach the widest possible range of people. And I think the things that I've talked about there, it's quite a good mix of things, but there are going to be people that perhaps are in the category of they're not particularly aware, they're not necessarily particularly interested at this point, but actually it's still important that we speak to them and we hear from them and we involve them in this work. So it's actually going that extra mile really to try and reach those people and make sure we get a really good mix of views. So if you've got any suggestions about ways we could do that, then we'd be really happy to hear those.
Tom, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. When I'm thinking about community engagement, in respect of empowering the community, taking on their own community-owned climate change projects, for example.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think along the lines of partners we've had in the past. I think Smallwoods, who have received grants from Telford and Wrekin Council before, who have particular expertise in managing woodlands, coppice trees, which the science tells us actually capture more carbon and process more carbon dioxide than a fully mature tree. I look around the borough and we've got millions of trees, and a lot of them are fully mature trees and perhaps not doing as good a job as they could be potentially. Yeah. I was thinking if we could somehow sort of devolve responsibility down to community-owned groups like that. It beds the seed of that tackling climate change responsibility within the community, as opposed to centralising responsibility from the council outwards. Mm-hmm. We could, work it from the peripherals of the people helping. We're coming out from sort of burning the candle from both ends kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's definitely something else we should be looking at, rather than just sending out communication saying we should be doing this, we should be doing that. I mean, getting the community directly involved, promoting those community-owned projects, I think is certainly a worthwhile avenue exploring.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good suggestion, and we do have obviously good relationships in the council with a lot of different organisations in the community and voluntary sector, and in fact, I believe Smallwoods are actually on the partnership, Harge.
Yes, that's correct.
So I'm sure they will be probably saying something similar. I think we do have grants available to community groups who are either starting up or who need help to expand into new areas of work. So actually, if there was groups coming forward that wanted to get involved with doing some new projects, then there are opportunities to bid for funding. So we are quite well set up from that point of view. We've got a good support network for those community groups if there was that appetite to get involved in the way that you describe.
Sure. I just thinking, if I just come back very quickly, because I know Tim's waiting to ask the question. With regards to directly engaging with the people to find out if they would be interested in those kind of things in the first instance, we were talking about the resident survey that's due to go out. I don't know if that's already printed, or if there was anything.
Not yet.
If there was anything along the lines of that kind of question, if we could say, would you be interested in this kind of project? Would you, taking on the responsibility of a woodland next to a school or whatever? How you would ask that question, I'm not sure, but maybe that's something worth considering to put into that survey, so we can, at least we can put out a fishing rod and find out who would be interested in that kind of thing and where they are. Yeah.
Well, it's very timely because I've got to look at it tomorrow evening to sign off the final questions. So we can certainly have a look and see if we can squeeze it in. I have to say, it's quite a long survey. It's really hopefully going to be something in it that's of interest to most people. So I hope people will complete it, but we'll see if we can squeeze an extra question in. So yeah, absolutely, I think that's a useful area to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion. Okay.
Tim, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, very briefly. I'd like absolutely to support what Thomas has suggested. I think it's a brilliant idea that we promote getting a local ownership, even if it's a moral ownership of an asset, which could deliver. It does deliver today, but could deliver double tomorrow. And one example is the coppicing woodland, which is an excellent suggestion because that's right. Faster growing woodland will be definitely doing a better job of sequestration. But the other same context would be grassland to meadowland. So perhaps we should be looking at what areas, not necessarily highway verges, but maybe highway verges, which are currently mown flat, but as the officer said, deliver double the sequestration performance if they're more of a meadowland. So it's the same context, Thomas, I think. That's another kind of asset, but getting that local ownership of making the asset work harder. And that leads on to the point I was going to raise, which is that's potentially very motivating for some people to be able to be given that local ownership. And they do it because they believe it's right and because it gives them a warm feeling and they're that kind of person. Fliss mentioned the more hard to reach groups. And there'll be another part of the borough where we've got people who are perhaps less likely to engage. And they might be asking, what's in it for me? So we might look at an approach with them of incentives. Now, I haven't necessarily got any incentives for climate for carbon emission reductions, but if we looked at recycling, which is in the wider environmental context, certainly Germany, when they decided that they were going to introduce much higher recycling rates, introduced refund and deposit schemes straight away. So what was in it for the individual? They got a penny back when they deposited a tin can. And you don't get waste tin cans in the high street or in the gutters in Germany because they're worth money. And I just wonder whether that's something that the council might look at, is whether there are opportunities for discount schemes or refund schemes or deposit schemes to make it worthwhile, if you like, for people to get engaged who don't want to get engaged just for a warm feeling. They're saying, what's in it for me? I wonder if you could explore that, please.
Okay.
Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry. Just a couple of little points, really. Totally agree with what Tim's saying there, and I think that was one of the issues that came out of the meeting that we had when we did the climate change meeting. That was how we target people, and I think I've mentioned before. I've probably droned on about it. It's educating people, because that's the key, and getting that knowledge across, because then they understand why they're doing certain things around the climate change, and also with the incentives, things like that. It was very sort of in the limelight that the poorer areas in the community don't engage as much, purely because they can't afford to. When they're doing, like, the food schemes from buying local and stuff like this, your veg and things like that, it's very hard for them to engage, because they can pick up a tin of beans for 9p from Lidl, or carrots or whatever, but to get fresh stuff, it's costing them 40p. So it's getting that help there and getting the right direction in that. I think also the other question going off from that is, with the ownership of some of the land we've got, like some of the local nature reserves and the management of them, do we still outsource that? I know that the Wildlife Trust used to manage them on behalf of the council in certain areas. Is that still the case? Just as an idea on what sort of green spaces we've got and how they're managed and how we can get people involved into that. So that's just 2 points there. Sorry.
I think it's a mixed picture on that. So there are some sites that are managed on behalf of the council. Carolyn might want to talk a bit about the Severn Gorge Countryside Trust, which I know she knows more than I do about that one. And we've obviously got, even with sites that we own, we've got quite a lot of active friends groups as well, who actually go out and do a lot of work to enhance those sites. So as well as sort of what the idea that Thomas was talking about, I think there's also that opportunity to work with the friends groups to actually say, you're doing a fantastic job of actually helping to maintain that that piece of open space, but actually there's some climate change enhancements that we could make jointly and actually sort of channel that work in that direction as well, I think. So I do think engaging with our existing volunteers that we have would be really positive.
Okay, thanks, Felicity.
Thank
Can I
you,
just
Mark.
add to that? I mean, yes, as Liz said, it's mixed in terms of our land ownership and our L&Rs. We do have, I mean, we obviously we've got an arrangement with Shropshire Wildlife Trust for a few sites. There are other sites that we manage directly, but they do have friends groups who also add on to, so we'll have a basic level of management, and they will then do additional works on top of that. And then all those friends groups are linked together through the Telford Green Space Partnership. And obviously that's a really useful group, and I know obviously they're very keen on this agenda. And how those sites can, not just be managed for their nature conservation, but also, play their part in terms of climate change. I just want to say something on the sort of coppicing thing, and there's been a lot in the press about this. It's not quite as straightforward as just coppicing is better than leaving high woodland. There are some studies that kind of what's called continuous cover forestry can be actually very useful. So you'll do some selective thinning and effectively allowing regrowth, but retaining a canopy, because that then stops the risk of heavy downpours of rain, then washing soil and releasing soil carbon. So it's kind of not quite as sort of straightforward as coppicing better than mature forest, but that's kind of how it's got reported in the press, but the science is a little bit more complicated. Thank you.
Tom, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Carolyn. I have to say I wasn't necessarily referring to like full coppicing trees, just for the record. But I know the enhancements to biodiversity, so full canopy isn't necessarily great long term, but no, I completely understand your points, and that's pretty much where I was coming from. I mean, the presentations we had from Smallwoods in recent years have been fantastic on that front. I'm just going back to the points about incentivisation. And I think we've got a real good opportunity here in respect of social enterprise. And it doesn't really get talked about a lot, but I mean, COVID's had a massive impact on our economy. There's going to be a lot of, potentially a lot of people out of work. And one of the things Smallwoods had taught us was people being paid to manage the woodland, so it's sort of become their thing. Like there'd be a bit of woodland where they would manage it, be paid to manage it, they'd sell the wood to make the money, and it has benefits for climate change. It's managing the wood. It's been taken out of the hands of the council, a huge savings from that respect. And it's a fantastic cycle of they're being paid to manage the woods, they sell the woods. It's good for climate change, and round we go. And that may be another opportunity to explore going forward, that social enterprise route. I don't know how viable it is, but certainly not worth being ruled out, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got a number of social enterprises in the borough, and again, the council does try to support those organisations that are wanting to establish themselves as social enterprises. So there is quite a lot of support that is provided as well if people are wanting to do that. So definitely, if there was an organisation that came forward wanting to do that, to move in that direction, then there's support available to help pump prime that. Obviously, we're a cooperative council. That's very much part of our ethos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Don't know if there's any other questions.
Chili frozen.
She's disappeared.
Oh no.
Councillor Reynolds.
Now she knows how it feels.
Councillor Reynolds, can you hear us?
She's just messaged me. Her laptop's shut down.
Oh dear.
Okay. Next meeting.
I don't know how we go from there.
So it's I think that's all that was to be discussed. There was the chair's update from Councillor Reynolds. I was just having a look on the agenda to see if we had a vice chair for the committee, and we don't, do we? I don't think.
No. I'm just asking her now if she wants to dial me, and then I'll put the phone up to do her update, if that's going to be any good.
Well, I think Kieran, are you online?
I am.
I think from the briefing that we had with the chair prior to the meeting, was there anything that was going to be raised during the chair's update?
The chair was going to notify the committee that a letter will be going out to Veolia in the next week, inviting them to a meeting in September to assess high street recycling.
Oh yeah.
Yes, so I think the committee, when it last met, asked if Veolia could be invited in, and so the chair has agreed that a letter can go out this week, as Kieran said. We will be finalising that letter this week, and then Gilly will get that sent out. As far as we're aware, that was the only announcements that the chair was going to make. In the absence of a vice chair, I wonder if it would be appropriate for members if they could just indicate if they were happy for the meeting to end at this point.
Happy if everyone else is.
Happy, yeah.
Yeah, her computer's updating, so it's actually, she's just typing back now. I said, is there anything else you wanted to add before we close? But I'm happy to come off as well. But I'm just waiting for a message to come over now.
We will make contact with Councillor Reynolds tomorrow and check if there was anything else that she wanted to notify the committee of, and if so, we'll circulate it by email.
Okay.
But if I'm not hearing any dissent, then I will take it upon myself to say that the meeting is at an end, and we'll notify you of the next meeting date, which will hopefully be in September.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.